Welcome to the life and legacy of Chief Michael A Ojomoh. This is the first video in a three-part documentary about the great man from Amedokhian, Uromi. In this first part of the presentation, we will consider his childhood, how he left Amedokhian for Benin, and some of his contribution to the Amedokhian community and Uromi. This is proudly presented to you by Emmy Memorial or Maria Ewanfo Memorial, a part of our project which looks into the sharing of our stories and those of our loved ones. The project is dedicated to my beloved mother of blessed memory, Mrs. Maria Ewanfo. She departed this sinful world in July of 2021. Now, we have decided to remember her name with this project and also other people who we so much care about, such as Chief Michael A Ojomoh, in a long list of others. May the name of our loved ones always remain alive and in our memories.
Well, of course, everything I have to say of him being a child as my father would be from recollections of what he told me. He was born in Amedokhian village in Uromi, Edo State. And at the age of 5, he was an orphan, lived with an uncle, and he didn't go to school. He was always sent to the farm.
Describing Ojomoh is something that we can say like somebody writing a thesis. The character, the disposition, and the personality of Ojomoh to be discussed is wide enough. It's wide enough.
Without being biased, I would say that is a man who truly loved his people, very kind, generous, a keeper of his brothers, a good father, a generous soul, gentle, even though he was very strong, but at the same time firm and a disciplinarian. Definitely a credit to his environment.
Chief Ojomoh is well known to me. He hails from Idigun quarters of Amedokhian in Uromi.
The late Chief Michael A Ojomoh, who was the Imam of Benin, the Osuma of Uromi Kingdom, was a man that was generally loved by his people.
His early days, of course, I wasn't born because, he was much, much older.
But from some elders, we understood that he was not from a very rich and wealthy home. But he grew up in Amedokhian and he used to follow his siblings to the farm. And you know what it is then. And I learned that while they were in the farm,
based on what people told us of him, based on what we read about him in books, as well as our personal experience with him in his later years, I was told, and he even said so himself, he had a very humble background.
Well, as I heard at that time, although I was not there, they said he was with his uncle when they were working on the farm. He had that aeroplane was passing. He said, "Oh, one day, I will enter this aeroplane."
Must have been one of the BOAC aircrafts at the time. And he said to the people in the farm with him that one day he's actually going to fly in that aircraft.
And as a young man, he was weeding with a hole in hand. I think he almost hit him on the head and said, "Stop dreaming. How can you say such a thing?"
The uncle said, "What? Who will take you to aeroplane? Or who will take you to where we enter aeroplane?"
And he was severely beaten.
And he never found that funny.
So from there, the man left the village.
That dream of his engendered him to travel out of Uromi. I went to meet with one of his relations in Benin, stayed there, and we understood he worked briefly in a bookshop, I'm sure, in Benin, and started his business life there in Benin, where he stayed until he died.
That very day, he left the farm and went to town crying, and went to the motor park and said he was going to a place called Benin, because he had heard of Benin. And as fortune would have it, he met his auntie in the motor park, who saw him, asking him what was he doing? What was he doing in the motor park? And why was he crying? And he relayed the story to his auntie and said, well, he wanted to go to Benin. And it so happened that this very auntie lived in Benin, was married to the late great Dalton Asemutu. She then took him to Benin, sent a message home that they are taking young Michael with her to Benin and would return him on her next visit to Uromi. Well, that never happened, and the young Michael remained in Benin all his life. He was a houseboy in late Dalton Asemuta's household. When he got older, he was a rubber tapper at some point, and then worked for one of the late publishers, Idenya, the famous Idenya bookshop on Mission Road. And from then, he learned the ropes, became a bookkeeper. And then at that stage, too, he was in the seminary of the Catholic Church at St. Joseph, where he received his early education. He didn't complete secondary school. I think he left what they call then Standard 6. But that gave him a very solid education foundation. And as I said, he later became a bookkeeper and would later set up his own bookshop, traveling as far as Ghana with books and supply books. And it was at this point, as a young man, he started to prosper, had very good clients, one of whom was our late Royal Majesty Akenzwa II. And he would supply books to his son, who would later obviously become Irediawa, Oba Irediawa, His Royal Majesty. And he grew, and from being a bookseller, he later went into construction.
It is actually in Benin City he made his mark. He was big in property development, real estate. And in fact, it is said that at his peak, you could say he owned all the half of the properties on Etete, part of GRA in Benin City. But at the time I really got close to him, he still was running his property business, was a major distributor to Guinness. He was into a lot of businesses. And he was also very active at the Palace of the Oba of Benin, Oba Irediawa of blessed memory.
To the best of my knowledge, it's about the only chief I know who was so recognized by the Oba of Benin as a palace chief. The only Asa man that was so recognized by the Oba of Benin during his days.
To be recognized by the Oba of Benin is not something that happens all the time, and certainly not for all people. Chief Michael A Ojomoh is surely a great Isama, worthy of respect and admiration. As we move on to learn about the person of Chief Michael A Ojomoh, I want to share a small quote, and I'm sure you will find the significance several times over in the course of this video documentary. Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That was from Martin Luther King Jr., the American civil rights activist, one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. Yes, keep the key word in your heart, service, because we can all serve in our different capacities. That leads me to my question. How did these men who are now talking of the great Ojomoh get to know him? I'm sure you want to understand that too.
I am privileged and opportune to know Chief Ojomoh personally.
I got to hear of him when I was concluding my secondary school in the late 70s.
I have visited him in Benin. He has always come to Uromi. He is a philanthropist. He's a giver and a man that is die-hardly interested in his people.
When I met him then, after graduation, I told him that I wanted to join either the army or the police force, that I will need his assistance. He told me it's all right, he will see what he can do. And then I left. Shortly after that, I got a job in the presidency. And I went back to tell him that I've gotten a job. And then he said, I could recall, he's sure I could recall when I told him I wanted to join the police force. And that was the way he looked at me. He was just wondering why a young man like me, very enterprising, would want to go into the Nigeria, want to join the force instead of looking for an administrative job and all that. It was lovely. He wanted to help where he could. And then when I also went into politics, I met him severally. And of course, he tried to assist me. There can be no doubt about that. And he wasn't a politician as such, but was friend to politicians.
He's a man that is well known. Even children yet unborn, we get to know him because he left a legacy. You cannot discuss the history of Uromi and Amedokhian in Uromi without making mention of Chief Ojomoh. His contributions to the development of Amedokhian is enormous.
You see, when you are growing up as a young chap, you hear of men who are doing great deeds and making impact in business across the states. And stories about him almost sound like fables to our impressionable young minds. And then suddenly you have direct contact with him. It actually has a sobering effect.
For many of us, we really knew Ojomoh when he was already an adult, not in his youthful age. My first glimpse of him, like I told you, was in the early 70s, around 76, 77, 78. And at that time, I was already a full-grown man. The period I met him, like I did say, was a jolly good fellow. Somebody that one would love to be close to. He was quite amiable, unassuming, would come around. The elders in the community would pay a courtesy call to him, would receive all of them.
Like I said, I had opportunity to visit him in Benin. This visit was in response of his interest in Amedokhian as a community. I didn't go there alone anyway. I was there in company of late Okwelegbe, a sitting banker. We went there to discuss the welfare, the betterment, and development of Amedokhian. In fact, when I got to his compound, it's a palace. The reception was unique. It was down to earth, but I must add, if I say he's beautiful, I'm not trying to be exaggerative. He's a handsome gentleman. His dark color is shiny. We met him seated. To our surprise, lunch was for everybody. People started trooping in for lunch. And we asked, is this a routine or because we have come to see? He said, no. People told us that, no, that's what he does every day. So people now know when he has his lunch, and they will come sit down with him. He will eat with whoever visits him at that particular time. And we're lucky to dine with him. We saw in him that he's a man of principles, a man of his words. We ate and drank there and discussed issues concerning Amedokhian. And when we told him, he made a series of promises which he fulfilled. And that is why we reverend him, we respect him. I personally, I can say I adore him, because the discussions we had, he actually stood his grounds and made sure that all the promises he's made were fulfilled.
When I really started to have direct contact with him was way back 1986, because I actually did my youth service 1984 to 85. And by 85, he was building that massive house, that palatial Arabian style house at Amedokhian. And so at that time, I was looking for jobs. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I used to meet with him when he comes from Benin to personally supervise the building of that edifice. And during that period, he used to sometimes send us on errands, sometimes to traditional rulers or some of his friends, like the Onoji of Uboha, who incidentally is the Onoji of the town from where his mother hails. And then to the Onoji of Uromi and several other people in Uromi town. And then, of course, I have traveled with him to Benin, to his house, to several ceremonies, including the burial of Abe, Chief Abe, the father of retired Major General Abe. One of the things that struck me when I met him was this man that we hear so much about, so wealthy and so renowned, so well respected. His humility was out of this world. Because as young as I was, and as young as other friends of mine were, he treated us like, I don't know, contemporaries almost. The way he would speak with you, sometimes ask your opinion. It was amazing. And I will give you one example. There was a time Honorable Tula asked me to quickly go to his house because there was a land dispute which was about to be settled, and some people were traveling from the village to meet him and then discuss the land issue so that the issue can be amicably resolved between them and one other elderly man, well-respected man as well. And that he couldn't come from Abuja, so he asked me if I could help him, and I said yes. So here was I, the youngest person among these respected men, which included Deg Asha. I'm sure you've heard about him, you know him. The late Ovole, Chief Ovole, then Chief Ojomoh himself, as well as the other parties were expecting to come from the village. When we were waiting for so long and those who were expecting hadn't come, and they then sent a message that they had a problem with their vehicle on their way to Benin. I remember I was asked to read certain documents related to the dispute. As young as I was, I looked up to him and I said, Chief, since it's only one party that is present here, I don't think it is fair for us to enter into the discussion of the matter with just one party around. He looked at the other gentleman and then said, I think this young man is right. This issue will be postponed to a later date. So you can imagine the kind of humility and wisdom that he had.
You know, you cannot visit Chief Ojomoh and leave empty-handed. He must give you something to go back home. Could be in form of transport or buy fuel in your car to drive back home. Haven't eaten with him. So I counted myself as an opportune man to have dined and eaten with Chief Ojomoh, a chief in the Benin Kingdom, a chief in Uromi, a wealthy man for that matter. I counted myself blessed. And I think others who went counted themselves blessed.
Meeting such a giant among Amedokhian, Uromi, and Esan people is truly a blessing. Yes, it is. Now, for the benefit of some of you who might not know, I want you to understand that we're not talking about the late Chief Michael A Ojomoh just because of his wealth, the property he owned, or his social influence per se. We are talking of him for his contribution to the life of his people. You see, it's not our fault if we are born into a certain situation, culture, or belief system. But I think we have to make sense of that situation and reshape a different narration if we so wish. Chief Michael A Ojomoh could not have wished to be an orphan. Not at all. And he was even beaten for daring to dream. But he chose a different way to restitute that unkind treatment meted out to him when he was even much vulnerable. He chose to pay back in kind. Now, imagine if many of us are living like that, seeing life as nothing more than an opportunity to serve others and leave our mark in the hands of time. What if people can see you as a solution, that when they call, you will answer? That is not easy, I know. But what if we can be that in our various positions in life?
Then, well, let me ask you, what is the story of the prodigal son? Did the father not slaughter the biggest bull? Perfect story of forgiveness and understanding that when you are blessed by God, the things that become important in your life, being useful to people and trying to improve people's lives.
He's a nice man. Not everybody that is bad. Because for him now, he thought, suppose this man did not hit me or drive me out of the house, I wouldn't have been like this. So because of that, you have to be kind to everybody. So that is what I have seen on that.
They say north, south, east, or west, home is home. Even if he had to leave them because of what the maltreatment somebody gave to him, you can see that was akin to what happened to Joseph by his brothers, the way they treated him. They sold him into slavery, and he got to Egypt and became the prime minister. I'm sure if that had not happened, he would not have seen the need to leave the community to go to Benin, where he prospered greatly. And of course, notwithstanding the way he was treated, he remembered his home and he came back. I think all of us should have this at the back of our mind, that no matter where you go, you will eventually come back to your roots. Wherever we find ourselves, whether we are within the country or abroad, let us remember where we come from. This gave rise to the association we have put together, which we call the Amedokhian Development Association. As we speak, we're able to connect all our brothers and sisters. We have a forum to discuss issues that pertain to Amedokhian, and we have a yearly Easter conference where we come together and discuss developmental issues that affect our people.
My father always used to say to me, when you are blessed by God, He doesn't just bless you for only you. You are blessed to be a provider for many and to bless others. And this is why I've always said, having studied my father, my opinion about riches is that a man can only be judged as to how rich he is by how much he has been able to impact the lives of others. That is the measure of richness. How much have you been able to do in the lives of others with the gift that God has given you? It's one of the lessons I learned from my father. So for him, as a young man who later became blessed by God, he spread his love to everybody. Nobody was discriminated against. The entire family enjoyed his largesse. Nobody was left out. So I don't think anybody in the family, close or extended, can say that they did not enjoy, my father when he was alive. He spread his happiness across to everybody. And growing up, we as his children, we grew up just with the same privileges as everybody. As I said, our house was always full. We had brothers, cousins, nephews, nieces, all living with us in the house. We all ate the same food from the same table. Everybody was educated. We all had the same privileges. And I don't think anybody was shortchanged at all. So it was a great lesson. It was a great lesson in life.
Michelle Obama famously said, power does not change your character. Instead, it actually exposes the character you have. So Chief Ojomoh's wealth and fame is not what made him a philanthropist. He appears to be somebody who had that love of the people and the love of giving at heart. Therefore, even though he had enough reasons to have a not so good memory of his childhood, yet he took Amedokhian as the centerpiece of his being.
Like I told you, we went to discuss the developmental strides, what we are lacking in our community. For instance, that was the omnibus, that we need a lot of things. And what do you need? You need a good road. You need water to drink. Education should be there. Healthcare. Name them. It suffices to say that the Uromi, that is from Angu 80 to Ugboha, that express road, though part of it is getting bad now, was the handiwork of our great father, late Chief Ojomoh.
At that time, if you are coming from Uromi main town to Amedokhian, you pass through Ukori, you pass through Uwalo. There is 2 Uwalo in Uromi, Uwalonoke and Walusogo. That Walusogo, first of all, from the market, Uromi main market, you get to Adakere. From Adakere, you get to Wala Usogo. After Walusogo, you get to Ukori before you get to Idumojo Ukori. From Idumojo Ukori, you pass through there to Ikeke Amedokhian. From there to Idigu. From Idigu, you cannot go to Uboha. That's how we do. On leg. For that time, we cannot, even myself, I trek it. It's a long distance. It's not a tie road. So that is how we do. We walk it at that time. And it will take you more than some hours before you, from Uromi Metam to Amedokhian.
He told me that when that Amedokhian road, which is the Uromi to Ugboha road, was started in 1977, that contract was actually awarded by a naval officer who was posted to Benin State as the military administrator. But that same naval officer had been in Benin City when the hostilities that eventually led to the Nigerian Civil War broke out in 1967. And he had to be hidden by Chief Ojomoh. Otherwise, the Biafran soldiers that arrived in Benin City the first time would have killed him. And so he survived, fought in the war, and now, years later, he was appointed military administrator to Benin State. And so that brought him back to Benin City, and he had to look for a chief, and eventually asked Chief what he would want him to do for him, because now he was in a position to dispense patronage. However, instead of looking for benefits for himself and for his pocket, he told the military administrator to help tar the road from Uromi to Ugboha. And that road was going to benefit his people at Amedokhian, Uromi at large, as well as Ugboha, where his mother hails from. And so it was that in 1977, 78, that road was tarred for the first time. So that will tell you the nature of the man. Instead of looking for benefits for himself, was rather more in tune with what his people desired and needed and how to make their condition better.
I remember then, Ogbemudia was the governor. He influenced the tarring of that road to Ugboha, cutting through Amedokhian. That was a very big achievement on his part. And on our own side, it enabled us to move freely from the village, get our crops, and come to sell in the main market. That is one of his achievements.
One of his achievements. I wanted to pay attention to that because there were many achievements, or if you like, his contribution to the life of Amedokhian and Uromi people. And for you not to know this as an Amedokhian person would be a huge error, because even in one of the Nigerian national items, we were advised to honor the works of our heroes past. The late Chief Michael A Ojomoh was a great hero to the Amedokhian people, and we are going to honor him as such.
When we were young in the early 60s, that was when we experienced pipe-borne water. As we were growing up, it was like diamond. You can't find it. Single-handedly, I am quoting that. Chief Ojomoh dug a borehole in Amedokhian, and the water was being distributed free of charge. The maintenance of the borehole was solely his responsibility. If the water ceases, he will be informed. He will come back with his engineers, and they get us back to be enjoying water.
People were always going there to fetch water because at that time, there was no water source close by. He found that industrial borehole. American community will go there. He even fixed some pipes across from not just only his house. The people were able to get water along that stretch close to his house. They did some reticulation to the close by area where people will come and fetch water. They'll bring their jerry cans. Some come with their vehicles to take water and all that. We're very happy that we had that opportunity. But as it is, because it was the only water source that was there, oftentimes he broke down and he would still go and mend it on his own, do all the repairs on his own. I know it must have cost him a fortune to sink that borehole. And even at that, when there were issues, he was still responsible, largely responsible.
I grew up to meet pipe-borne water flowing at Amedokhian and the rest of Uromi. And we were told in our earlier years that the project for that water was influenced in the Western region government by Chief Toninahoro, who played a very critical role in that government in those days. And therefore, while going to farm, we'll just take either a calabash or a jerry can to the public tap and fetch clean water, In fact, most of the time then, it was the water board operatives trying to prevent us from wasting water because we used to go there to go and shower and all that. And that will tell you how good management of government resources was in those growing up days. Now, over time, including the days we were now in secondary school and in the university, pipe-borne water was no more available. And so the biggest problem that people had was having water for domestic uses, because Uromi as a whole virtually has no river at all, because Uromi is on the Asian plateau. And that means that the plateau is well drained, and most of the places, the low-lying areas, are outside Uromi. Places like Uboha, Udomi, Ujokwa, all those areas have rivers. But Uromi hardly have any river what is named. And so water became a big issue for everyone. And then these tankers that used to go to Uboha River to fetch water and sell. Of course, not everybody can afford to buy it. And then there were those who had what they call wells, not wells really, because in a well, water is supposed to come from the ground. But what they call wells, actually underground tanks, which were dug, and then tankers came to drop water. And then they sell to those who they couldn't afford to create one for themselves. So what Chief did was, while building that house, he simultaneously decided to drill a borehole that would give water to the community. And even though it was always said that it's almost impossible to get a borehole to work at Uromi because of the height of the land area, as well as the depth of the aquifer where you could pull such water, he put resources behind his vision. And after drilling for weeks, they were able to hit water. And he then constructed massive braithwaite tanks, overhead tanks, to make sure that water gets to most parts of Obion. Uromi is divided into Obera and Obion. When you talk about Obion, you're talking of Amedokhian, Ukoni, Onewa, a lot of those places, Tako, and so on and so forth, parts of Ifandion. And what he did was not just erecting that overhead tank, he also reticulated the water, meaning he laid pipes through the roads, the major roads, so that once water is pumped and that tank has water, it flows by gravity and gets distributed to public taps. So he revived the public taps, and those who could afford it reticulated the water into their premises and some into their wells. And therefore, water became available again for the people free of charge. In other words, he was doing for the people what the government to whom they pay taxes couldn't even do for them. And I can tell you the impact of that on the people in terms of poverty alleviation, because they spent money buying water previously, and even in terms of health, because you know, drinking clean water is a step towards good health. So that was one of the major things he did for his people.
I even forgot, I think, what he's most known for, that he actually brought water to his people in Amedokhian at a time when water was unavailable in the entire Eastern land. He was able to drill and heat water at the time. So, in fact, Amedokhian came onto the map of Eastern land because that was the only community where there was water at the time, and people came from far and wide to come and fetch water. And my father also said to me, because one day I asked him, how come the borehole wasn't situated in the main compound? And he said the reason why he did that, if he had put the borehole in his own compound, then the borehole belongs to him, the water source belonged to him. So he placed it outside to show that that borehole belonged to the community. And if he should die the next day, that borehole would never be claimed by anybody in the Ojomoh family, but would belong to Amedokhian community as a whole. So again, that was another, I think, selfless contribution that he made to Amedokhian village and to the rest of Uromi and even beyond, because I know people would even come from places like Ubiaja, Iroa, to come and fetch water at the time. What was his thinking? He wasn't a politician. He wasn't seeking office. You know, he wasn't asking for anything in return. All the man wanted to do was always to show love, to give, and to be an example as to how we should live our lives for others. And I think that's basically what he was trying to do. He wasn't in competition with anybody, and he was blessed by God. So he always believed that he had to share these blessings. He had to share these blessings in any way that he could. And all the philanthropy that he did in all his life. I mean, I know there's so many people he sponsored through school. It's amazing because I up until last week, I met some people. I was at a forum with some elders, and they sat me down and told me more things about my father that I didn't even know. So, he indeed was a great man, and definitely his brother's, and he never got tired of doing for his people. I remember in Benin, if you were an Asian man in those days, the general idea was that if you get to Benin, you are lost. You don't have a house, you don't have food to eat or anything. Just tell the taxi driver they should take you to Ojomoh's house, and everything will be all right. And this is how it used to happen. So, as a young man, our house was always full of people from Mason land, and it was always very exciting. The house was never empty.
Chief Ojomoh is the one that brought electricity, erecting all the poles, installing the conductors, and personally paying for transformers to extend electricity from Uromi town center through Walosogo, Ukoni, all the way down to Amedokhian. And within Amedokhian, he still distributed the power to places like Okuje, the road leading to Idumia-Sele, and Iwele Junction, and so on. And therefore, people in that axis began to enjoy electricity, public electric supply for the first time due to his philanthropy. In addition, he also brought down telephone service to the village, and indeed gave telephones free to some prominent, respected elders in the village. I know their names, but I wouldn't want to mention that now. So that will tell you how philanthropic this man was and the impactful nature of his life and times on the people of Amedokhian.
My father, late Paono Memelo Monra, benefited from Chief Ojomoh a landline telephone, which enabled him and Chief Ojomoh to go into discussions of what is happening in Amedokhian daily, so to speak. And I tell you this, the charges were being paid by him. Sometimes electricity bill, it will upset them for Amedokhian community.